You have spent your whole life feeling everything. The room shifts when someone angry walks in, and your body knows before your mind catches up. A friend texts you, "I'm fine," and you feel the lie in your chest like a weight. You walk past a stranger on the street and absorb their sadness without meaning to, without choosing to, without any defense against it. You are an emotional sponge in a world that bleeds constantly, and you have convinced yourself that this sensitivity is your gift, your purpose, your identity. But here is the truth. Nobody warned you about. The empath who never stops caring does not become enlightened. They become exhausted. They become resentful. They become a shell of the person they were trying to save by feeling everything for everyone. And the day they finally stop caring is not the day they become cold. It is the day they become free. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who mapped the hidden architecture of the human soul, understood this transformation better than anyone. He saw that true awakening does not come from expanding your capacity to absorb the world's pain. It comes from withdrawing that capacity, from reclaiming the energy you have been leaking everywhere, from learning that the final stage of empathy is not more feeling. It is boundaries so deep they look like indifference to everyone who has been using you. If you're tired of being the person everyone leans on and no one sees, hit that like button and subscribe. This channel is for people who are done performing compassion and ready to reclaim themselves. The empath as identity trap. Let us start with something uncomfortable. The word empath has become a badge of honor, a personality type, a spiritual identity. You see it in bios and dating profiles and self-descriptions. I am an empath, as if this explains everything. As if this justifies everything. As if this is the final word on who you are. But Jung would see this differently. He would see the empath identity not as a gift, but as a complex, a psychological pattern that serves a hidden purpose. The person who identifies as an empath is often someone who learned early that their safety depended on reading the room, on sensing danger before it arrived, on managing other people's emotions so that other people's emotions did not destroy them. This is not a spiritual awakening. This is a childhood survival strategy that became a personality. Think about it. The child who grows up with an unpredictable parent learns to scan for mood shifts. The child who grows up with a depressed parent learns to become cheerful to lift the energy. The child who grows up with an angry parent learns to become invisible or accommodating, or whatever version of themselves prevents the explosion. These children do not choose this. They adapt to it, and the adaptation becomes so automatic, so necessary, that they forget it was ever a choice. By adulthood, this adaptation has a name: empathy. But it is not empathy in the healthy sense. It is hypervigilance dressed up as compassion. It is fear of abandonment translated into emotional labor. It is the compulsive need to manage other people's inner worlds because your own inner world was never safe enough to inhabit. Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to survive. The empath persona says, "I am here for you. I feel your pain. I will absorb it so you do not have to face it alone." But behind that persona is a terrified child who believes that if they stop performing this function, they will be abandoned. They will be worthless. They will cease to exist in any way that matters, and so the empath keeps caring, keeps feeling, keeps leaking energy into every relationship, every room, every interaction. Not because they want to, because they do not know how to stop. Because stopping feels like death. The psychology of emotional leaking. Jung's concept of psychic energy is essential here. He believed that each person has a finite amount of psychological energy, what he called libido, though not in the purely sexual sense we use today. This energy is the fuel of your life. It powers your creativity, your ambition, your relationships, your healing. And when it is depleted, you collapse. Not physically, though that may follow, but psychologically. You become hollow. You go through the motions. You exist without living. The empath's tragedy is that they have been trained to leak this energy constantly. Every time you take on someone else's emotion, you spend energy processing it. Every time you anticipate someone else's need, you spend energy preparing for it. Every time you suppress your own reaction to keep someone else comfortable, you spend energy maintaining the suppression. Every time you say yes when you mean no. Every time you apologize for existing. Every time you shrink yourself to make space for someone else's bigness. You leak. And here is what Jung understood that most empaths do not. This leaking is not virtuous. It is not selfless. It is not love. It is a failure of the ego's boundaries. The ego, in Jung psychology, is not arrogance. It is the center of consciousness. It is the part of you that says, "This is me, and that is not me." The empath's ego is weak, not because they are bad people, but because their boundaries were never allowed to form. They learned that their survival depended on dissolving the boundary between self and other, and they never learned to rebuild it. So they leak, and they leak, and they leak, until one day they wake up and realize they have nothing left. No energy for their own dreams, no capacity for their own joy, no sense of who they are, separate from what they do for others. They have become a vessel for other people's experiences, and their own experience has been emptied out. This is not awakening. This is exhaustion, and the empath who reaches this point faces a choice that feels impossible. Keep leaking and die slowly, or stop caring and risk being seen as the monster they always feared they were. The shadow of the empath. Jung's most important contribution to psychology is the concept of the shadow. The shadow is everything we reject about ourselves, everything we do not want to be, everything we were taught was unacceptable. The shadow contains our anger, our selfishness, our cruelty, our indifference, and the more we reject these qualities, the more powerful they become in the unconscious. The empath has built an entire identity around rejecting the shadow. They are the good one, the kind one, the one who never gets angry, the one who always understands, the one who forgives everything. This is not virtue. This is denial. And denial always exacts a price. The price is that the empath's shadow grows enormous. All the anger they never expressed, all the resentment they never acknowledged, all the times they wanted to scream, "I do not care about your problems," and instead said, "I am here for you." All of this goes into the shadow. And the shadow does not disappear. It waits, it builds pressure, and eventually it erupts. This eruption can look like many things: a sudden cut-off of a long-term friendship, a mysterious illness that forces rest, a period of depression that makes any interaction feel impossible, a burst of rage at someone who does not deserve it, or simply the day the empath stops caring, not gradually, not gracefully, all at once, like a dam breaking. Jung would say this is not a breakdown. This is the psyche's attempt at healing. The empath has been living a one-sided life, and the psyche is demanding balance. The shadow is demanding integration. The denied selfishness, the denied anger, the denied indifference, they are all knocking at the door, and they will not be ignored forever. The day the empath stops caring is the day the shadow breaks through, and that day is terrifying for everyone involved, especially the empath. The collapse of the caretaker. There is a specific moment in this journey. You might not recognize it when it happens, but one day you will look back and see that everything changed. It is the moment someone you love comes to you with their pain. The same kind of pain they have brought to you 100 times before, the same circular story, the same refusal to change, The same expectation that you will listen, absorb, comfort, and send them back into the world lighter while you carry the weight. And for the first time you feel nothing, not compassion, not irritation, nothing. A blankness where your heart used to respond. A silence where your words of comfort used to live. You look at this person you have loved, this person you have sacrificed for, and you realize you do not care anymore. Not in a dramatic way, not in an angry way. You just do not have the energy to care. It is gone. And you do not know if it is gone for this moment or gone forever. This is the collapse of the caretaker, and it is the most terrifying moment of the empath's life because it threatens everything they believe about themselves. If I am not the person who cares, who am I if I am not the one who absorbs pain? What is my purpose? If I cannot feel for others, am I even human anymore? The people around you will not understand this moment. They will experience it as betrayal, as coldness, as the sudden emergence of a person they do not recognize. They will say, "You have changed. You used to be so caring. What happened to you?" And they will mean it as an accusation, because your change threatens their comfort. Your boundaries threaten their supply. And in that moment you'll face the deepest fear of the empath's life. The fear of being seen as bad. The fear of being abandoned for not performing your function. The fear that without your caretaking, you have no value. Jung would sit with you in this fear and say, "This is the threshold. This is where transformation begins, not in more caring, not in finding a way to keep performing, but in walking through the fear and discovering what is on the other side." The difference between caring and carrying. To understand what is on the other side, we need to make a distinction that the empath has never been allowed to make. The distinction between caring and carrying. Caring is a choice. It is the decision to be present with someone's pain without taking responsibility for it. It is the willingness to witness without fixing, to support without absorbing, to love without becoming the solution. Caring says, "I see you, I am here, and I trust you to find your way." Carrying is a compulsion. It is the inability to let someone else struggle. It is the belief that their pain is your emergency. It is the automatic absorption of their emotion into your own body. It is the silent contract that says, "I will feel this for you, so you do not have to." Carrying says, "Your pain is too much for you, so I will take it. Your life is too hard for you, so I will manage it. Your growth is too slow, so I will force it." The empath has spent their life carrying, not caring, and they have called it love. They have called it compassion. They have called it spiritual sensitivity. But it is not any of these things. It is control dressed up as service. It is fear dressed up as devotion. It is the belief that if you can just manage everyone else's experience, you will finally be safe. Jung understood that this pattern is not about the other person. It is about the empath's own unresolved wound. The empath carries because they cannot tolerate helplessness, their own helplessness as a child, when they could not save the parent or fix the family or stop the pain. They have been trying to heal that childhood helplessness ever since, by becoming powerful enough to fix everyone else, but it never works, because the wound is not out there. It is inside. And no amount of carrying other people's pain will heal the pain you have been carrying since before you knew how to name it. The day the empath stops caring is actually the day they stop carrying. And that day is not the end of compassion. It is the beginning of real compassion. The kind that does not deplete, the kind that does not control, the kind that can hold space without losing itself in the space it holds. The integration of indifference. Here is the paradox that Jung would want you to understand. The empath's final stage of awakening requires them to embrace the very quality they have spent their life rejecting: indifference. Not cruelty, not coldness, not the absence of love, but indifference, in the true sense, the state of being not different from oneself, the state of no longer differentiating your worth based on your usefulness to others, the state of no longer making your emotional state contingent on someone else's emotional state, the state of being complete within yourself, so complete that you do not need to merge with others to feel real. This indifference looks like not caring from the outside. The friend who used to drop everything for a crisis now says, "I am not available tonight." The partner who used to absorb every mood now says, "I cannot take this on right now." The family member who used to mediate every conflict now says, "This is not my problem to solve," and the world experiences this as coldness, as selfishness, as the loss of the person they depended on. But from the inside, this indifference is the opposite of coldness. It is the first time the empath has been warm to themselves. It is the first time their energy is circulating within their own being, instead of leaking out to everyone who demands it. It is the first time they are not performing care, but actually feeling what they feel, including the radical truth that they do not have to care about everything. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are, separate from the expectations of others, separate from the roles you were assigned, separate from the persona that has been performing your life. Individuation is not about becoming selfish in the conventional sense. It is about becoming a self. A distinct, bounded, autonomous center of consciousness that can relate to others without dissolving into them. The empath who reaches this stage has integrated their shadow. They have made peace with the parts of themselves they once rejected. They can be angry without being destructive. They can be selfish without being cruel. They can be indifferent without being cold. And most importantly, they can choose when to care instead of being compelled to care by every demand that comes their way. This is the final stage of awakening. Not more sensitivity, not more openness, not more absorption, but choice, sovereignty, the power to say no and mean it, the power to walk away from situations that drain you, the power to let people struggle without rushing to save them, the power to be fully present with someone without losing yourself in their presence. The grief of becoming real. The transition from compulsive caring to conscious choice is not painless. It involves a grief that most empaths are not prepared for. You will grieve the identity you built, the person everyone relied on, the one who was always there, the one who never said no. That person is dying. And even though that person was exhausting you, even though that person was a performance, they were also familiar. They were safe. They were how you knew how to exist in the world. Letting them go feels like letting go of yourself. You will grieve the relationships that cannot survive your change. Not everyone in your life wants you to be whole. Some people were attracted to your brokenness because your brokenness served them. They needed someone who would never say no, never set boundaries, never demand reciprocity. When you stop performing that function, they will leave, and you will have to let them leave. Not because you do not love them, but because love that depends on your self-destruction is not love. It is extraction. You will grieve the illusion that your caring ever saved anyone. This is perhaps the hardest grief. The empath believes deep in their unconscious that their absorption of pain actually helps, that by feeling someone's depression they lighten it, that by anticipating someone's need they prevent suffering, that by managing someone's emotions they protect that person from their own chaos. But this was never true. You cannot feel someone else's pain for them. You can only add your own exhaustion to their situation. You cannot grow for someone else. You can only delay their growth by removing the consequences of their choices. Your caring was not helping. It was enabling. And facing this truth is devastating. Jung understood that transformation requires death, the death of the old self, the death of old relationships, the death of old beliefs. And death, even when necessary, even when leading to rebirth, is still death. It still hurts. It still leaves you empty for a time. The empath who stops caring does not immediately become strong and whole. They first become nothing, a void where the old self used to be. And that void is terrifying. But it is also necessary, because nothingness is where new life begins. The seed must die in the ground before it can grow. The caterpillar must dissolve before it can become the butterfly. The empath must stop being who they were before they can become who they are. The new boundaries. When the grief begins to settle, something new emerges. Not the old empath restored and renewed. Something else entirely. A person who looks like the empath but is fundamentally different. This new person has boundaries that are not walls. They are membranes, permeable but selective. They let in what nourishes and keep out what depletes. They do not need to explain themselves. They do not need to justify their limits. They simply know what is theirs and what is not, and they act accordingly. This new person can feel someone's pain without absorbing it. They can witness suffering without becoming responsible for it. They can love someone deeply without needing to fix them. They can be present in a crisis without making the crisis their own. Their compassion has become precise. Surgical, it goes exactly where it is needed and no further. This new person can also be indifferent when indifference is appropriate. They can let someone fail. They can let someone learn from their mistakes. They can let someone sit in the discomfort of their own choices. And they do not feel guilty about this, because they understand that their indifference is not cruelty. It is respect. It is the recognition that other people are sovereign beings who do not need to be managed. Jung would recognize this person as individuated, not perfect, not without struggle, but whole, complete, a self that can relate to other selves without losing itself in the relating. And this wholeness is what the empath was seeking all along. Even though they were seeking it in the wrong place, they thought wholeness would come from giving everything away. But wholeness only comes from keeping enough to be full. The reactions of the world. The reactions of the world does not celebrate this transformation. The world mourns it. The people who benefited from the old empath will not understand the new one. They will say you have become hard, that you have lost your gift, that you used to be so caring and now you are so distant. They will try to guilt you back into your old role. They will use your history of generosity as evidence that you owe them continued generosity. They will accuse you of changing, as if change is betrayal. Some will leave. This is natural. Not everyone is meant to stay in your life through every transformation. The people who only loved your performance were never loving you. They were loving the function you serve, and when you stop serving that function, their love reveals itself for what it was, attachment, not connection. The people who stay are the ones who see you, not the role, not the performance. They may need time to adjust to the new boundaries. They may feel confused by the new indifference, but they will respect it. They will adapt to it. And eventually they will benefit from it, because a relationship with a whole person is infinitely richer than a relationship with a performing one. Jung believed that individuation always creates conflict with the collective. The person who becomes themselves threatens the group that depended on their conformity. This is why the empath's awakening feels so isolating at first. You are not just changing yourself. You are threatening the social order that your caretaking maintained. And the social order does not thank you for this. It punishes you for it. But the punishment is temporary. The isolation is temporary. What emerges on the other side is a life where your relationships are chosen, not compelled. where your caring is given, not extracted, where your presence is a gift, not an obligation. And that life, though smaller in some ways, is infinitely more real. The return of real caring here is the final surprise. The day the empath stops caring is not the end of caring. It is the return of real caring. When caring is compulsive, it is contaminated. It contains resentment, exhaustion, hidden contracts, unspoken demands. The empath who compulsively cares is not giving freely. They are giving in order to survive. They are giving in order to be loved. They are giving in order to be loved. They are giving in order to prevent abandonment. And the recipient feels this unconsciously. They feel the weight of obligation. They feel the pressure to perform gratitude. They feel the subtle demand that they be healed, be happy, be fixed, so that the empath's sacrifice was worth it. Real caring is different. It is clean. It expects nothing. It demands nothing. It can be given and withdrawn without drama because it is not tied to survival. The person who has integrated their shadow, who has become whole, who has stopped compulsively caring, this person can choose to care from a place of abundance rather than desperation. Their care does not deplete them because it is not extracted from a wound. It flows from a full cup. This is the paradox that Jung understood so deeply. The person who can be indifferent is the only person who can truly love. Because their love is not a compulsion. It is a choice. It is not a performance. It is an expression. It is not a transaction. It is a gift. The empath who reaches this stage does not stop caring about everything. They stop caring about everything compulsively. And in that stopping, they discover what they actually care about, not what they were trained to care about, not what they were guilted into caring about, not what they absorbed from other people's expectations, but what genuinely moves them, what genuinely moves them, what genuinely matters to them, what they would choose to care about even if no one ever thanked them, even if no one ever noticed, even if it never earned them the identity of the good one. This discovery is the final stage of awakening, not the expansion of feeling, but the refinement of it, not the absorption of everything, but the discernment of what is truly yours. The empath becomes, in the end, not more sensitive, but more precise, not more open, but more intentional, not more available to everyone, but more present to what actually matters. The silence after the storm. There is a quality to this final stage that is hard to describe. A silence. A stillness. A sense of being grounded in yourself in a way that no external validation can shake. The empath used to need feedback. They needed to know they had helped. They needed to see gratitude in someone's eyes. They needed to feel that their caring had landed, had mattered, had been worth the cost. This need for feedback was not about generosity. It was about survival. The empath needed to know they were still needed, because being needed was the only way they knew how to be real. The awakened empath does not need this anymore. They can care and walk away. They can give and not know if it landed. They can love and not be loved back, not because they are martyrs, but because their caring is no longer about them. It is not a performance for validation. It is simply what they choose to do, and the doing is enough. This silence is what looks like indifference from the outside. The friend who used to need long debriefs after helping someone now simply helps and moves on. The partner who used to need reassurance after every conflict now simply states their truth and lets the other person respond. The family member who used to need recognition for every sacrifice now simply lives their life without keeping score. The world experiences this as coldness. But it is not coldness. It is warmth that no longer needs to be reflected back in order to exist. It is love that has become self-sustaining. It is compassion that has finally, after all the leaking and all the exhaustion, found its source within. Jung called this the self with a capital S, the center of the psyche that is deeper than the ego, the place where individual consciousness connects to something universal. The self does not need to perform. It does not need to be needed. It simply is, and from this place of simply being, the awakened empath can finally, truly, authentically care. The final teaching. If you are an empath reading this, you are probably in one of two places. Either you are still leaking, still carrying, still exhausted, still performing the identity that is killing you slowly, or you have already begun the terrifying process of stopping, and you are facing the void, the grief, the accusations, the isolation that comes with transformation. Wherever you are, hear this. The day you stop caring is not the day you become less. It is the day you become real. You were never meant to be the world's emotional sponge. You were never meant to absorb pain that is not yours to carry. You were never meant to manage other people's inner lives while neglecting your own. These patterns were adaptations, survival strategies, ways of being that served a purpose once, but have become prisons. The world will not thank you for breaking free. The world liked you better when you were leaking, when you were available, when you were predictable, when your caring was compulsory rather than chosen. The world will call your boundaries selfishness. It will call your indifference coldness. It will call your awakening a loss. Let it call. The names do not matter. What matters is that you finally become who you are, not the empath, not the caretaker, not the one who is always there, but you, the real you, the one who can choose when to care and when not to, the one who can love without disappearing, the one who can be present without being consumed. This is Jung's final stage of awakening. Not more light, not more openness, not more e-from-ness, not more feeling. But boundaries so deep they look like indifference, boundaries so real they finally allow you to be human. If this resonated with something in you, I want to hear about it in the comments. Where are you in this journey? Are you still leaking, or have you begun to stop? What has the world said about your transformation? Share your story. We're all figuring this out together. Subscribe if you want more content that goes into the dark places of psychology and comes back with something real. Like this video if it helped you see your own pattern more clearly, and remember, the empath's greatest gift was never their ability to feel everything. It was their potential to become whole. And wholeness, in the end, is the only gift worth giving. Thank you for watching. Now go be real.